Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Ademar Albertin from Exim, an IFDC partner, and I will be your hostess for today's session. We are pleased to have you on board with this session that is called VeriSM Unwrapped and Applied. We would like to welcome our speakers, Claire Agutter, Chief Architect of VeriSM, Susan Van Hove, VeriSM Lead Author, Johan Bota, VeriSM Lead Author, Mr. Toda from Kabu.com from Japan, and Steve Leach from 6.6, and also Suzanne Galetli from IFDC. So I would like to inform you that this session will be recorded, and later you are going to have access to the recordings. You can send questions by texting on the menu located on the right side of your screen. That is called questions. Your questions will be addressed and answered along some points of this presentation. We wish you a pleasant session. Enjoy. Welcome to all you again. Claire, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ademar, and thank you to everyone for joining us. If you could move us on one slide, please, Ademar, and I'll just talk a little bit more about the agenda for today. So the agenda for today, we've got quite a lot of content that we want to go through. The first sort of 35 to 45 minutes will be some presentation from me about how we actually worked on this part of the VeriSM project. So some updates from the author group and a look ahead to what's coming in the next VeriSM publication. And then I'm going to hand over to Steve Leach. So Steve is a VeriSM contributor and also a VeriSM early adopter. So it's been really, really good to work with Steve and see his VeriSM journey. And he's going to talk a little bit about his experiences using VeriSM in a startup that offers cloud services. We've then got some recorded content from Mr. Toda, who's been working with Kabu.com in Japan. And we've also got a few more video messages from some of the contributors and authors who've been working on this VeriSM publication with us. So lots to get through, but some really interesting content, and I hope you will ask any questions in the question panel. We've got a couple of breakpoints during the agenda where we will take some questions. If we don't have time to get to your question, don't worry, we will be picking them up afterwards, but anything that comes to your mind, please do pop it into that question box and we will pick it up. Just a reminder as well from myself that we are focused here on VeriSM Unwrapped and Applied, which is the second VeriSM publication. We're not going to cover the kind of basics of VeriSM or the content from the first book. So if you're quite new to VeriSM and you're not familiar with the VeriSM model, or you've not kind of seen some of the earlier webinars, after we finish today's session, I would encourage you to go to verism.global and you'll find the first VeriSM webinar there. So you can cover off the VeriSM basics, but we're not really going to repeat those today. And if we can move on, please, Ademar. So just a reminder of where VeriSM started from and why we're kind of having this conversation, why we've been doing this work and why we've been producing this content. VeriSM is very much driven by the pressures of digital transformation. So digital transformation is exerting pressure on organisations. We are being asked to do more, we're being asked to do it faster, and we've seen a reaction to that with the adoption of lots of new ways of working. So things like Agile, DevOps, Lean. There's been a lot happening in the IT space, but that's also been kind of spilling out into the rest of the business. So there've been a lot of challenges in terms of digital products and services on organisations, but it's also creating pressures on individuals as well. As an IT professional or a service management professional, we're expected to know a lot more and interact a lot more with the other parts of the organisations that we work within. So it really was this kind of explosion of new ways of working, the demands it creates, and the pressures of digital transformation that were the drivers for VeriSM. And what we're going to do now is just talk a little bit about the organisation that has actually sponsored the VeriSM content and is working on this project. So Adamar, if we can move forward, and I'm going to introduce Suzanne Galletley from the IFDC just to tell us a little bit about the organisation that's behind VeriSM.
Thank you, Claire. So the IFDC, it stands for the International Foundation for Digital Competencies. As Claire mentioned, it's a fairly new organisation which has been set up to develop new approaches to help organisations and professionals to prepare for the digital age, basically. And it focuses on the competencies and skill sets that are needed for the challenges of the digital transformation and the digital age, and to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. VeriSM is the first of the approaches which has been developed by the IFDC, and it's been developed in cooperation with an international team of experts, so it's been really a community initiative, but Claire will talk more about that as we go through.
Thank you very much, and again, Adamar, if we can move on, please. Okay, so just a kind of summary of the story so far. So the first VeriSM book was published in 2017, and that was written by a very large global group of authors. And as you can see here, it proposed a new approach to service management. So we took a look from the perspective of the whole organisation and tried to stop thinking just from the perspective of IT. We shifted our thinking to look at digital products and services and look at their importance for organisations. So we're thinking about organisations as service providers. So in that first book, we were proposing a new approach, and to a certain extent, really, we were presenting a set of new ideas for feedback from the wider global community. And what we've seen since then is that the growth has been both rapid and very global. So we've got early adopters on several continents now, and in the next book we've actually got early adopter stories to share from the UK, from Japan and China. So the feedback that we got was really, really good, but then we also got a question, which is, you know, this sounds brilliant, how do I actually make it work in my organisation? Which is you know, perfectly reasonable, a perfectly appropriate thing to ask. And this was what we took as our kind of vision and our mission for the second book. So we took the feedback, you know, people said it was brilliant, now they want to know how to do it, and that was really what we set out to deliver in the second publication. So if we can move on, please, Adamar. So the first thing that we did was we pulled together a lead author team. So this was myself, Suzanne Van Hove, who's from the US, and Johan Botha, who's based in South Africa. So we met as a team of lead authors. We had a face-to-face meeting in the Netherlands, and you can see us all looking very happy there with lots of snacks on the table. And really that lead author meeting was just to kind of set the scope for what we wanted to do and what we wanted to deliver. We knew we were going to have another very big global author team. We knew we wanted, to a certain extent, to have quite a free-ranging conversation about some of the concepts, but we also needed some kind of agenda and some kind of structure. So we spent 2 days working together, just looking at the first VeriSM book, looking at the questions we were being asked, and then creating a very, very high level outline of the sort of things that we wanted to answer. Once we'd done that, we were then able to recruit the wider author team. And just like with the first publication, the focus was absolutely on having as diverse a set of authors as possible. And, you know, when we say diverse, we mean everything: location, age, gender, background, experience. We really wanted to kind of get as broad a set of opinions as possible. So once we had the author team in place as well, you can imagine we've got kind of 70 plus people from all over the world. It's really challenging to try and work together, but we wanted to make sure that everybody was able to contribute. So we used a mix of technologies to collaborate effectively. We had conference calls every week, and certainly for the first few months of the project, these really were just a discussion. So we would nominate a topic, might be something like digital leadership, and then based on that discussion that we had about, well, what does that mean? How are things changing? That helped us shape the content that then went into the book that we've written. As well as the conference call, we had a Slack channel which was running, and again that allowed lots of debate. It's very difficult when you've got somebody who's maybe based in New Zealand and somebody who's based in the US to have a discussion on a conference call, but the Slack channel was really helpful. And then we also used Dropbox, and we kind of refined and worked on documents in smaller groups in there. So it was a very, very intense process, but it was, for me, such a privilege to collaborate with such clever people from all over the world, and just get some very, very different ideas, not to go in with this is exactly what we're going to get to, but to go in with questions and say, what do we think about this? What's people experience? Where are things going in this new world that we're all working within? So what I'm going to do is, I think we've got Suzanne van Hove and Johan on the line. So Suzanne, first of all, I'm just going to ask you to briefly introduce yourself and just share your thoughts about working on this project.
Sure. Thanks very much, Claire. So Suzanne van Hove, and very fortunate, honored, and privileged to work on both of the VeriSM books. So being involved from the very beginning with Claire and with the global experts has been an amazing experience. And for those that know me, I love learning, and it's been a great learning experience as well. So VeriSM Unwrapped and Applied has got me so excited. I can't wait for it to get out. The questions that Claire brought up, how do I do this? It's just the information that we've all collaborated on and developed, and I'm going to say piloted through multiple venues in this book is exciting. I just can't even say enough about it. I'm very proud of the output, and really looking forward to seeing this come to real life. Watching the videos from Mr. Toda in Japan and talking to other early adopters, when you come up with an idea and then all of a sudden you see it come into play, there's nothing more satisfying. So hats off to this group, hats off to Exxon and IFDC and all of the collaborators for putting this together and making this information available to you. I think this is where service management needs to go. Nothing is lost. It's a new focus, and really, really addresses the need for velocity and agility without losing investment in what you've already done. So hold on to your seats. This is an exciting ride. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Adama, do we have Johan on the line?
No, unfortunately, no.
He said he's logged in, so maybe he'll be able to join us later. But I would absolutely echo what Suzanne has said. It was such an exciting project to work on, and even now the main work of the author team finished in June, and even now when I'm working with clients, talking to other people, I'm finding myself using techniques, tools, examples from this book in pretty much everything I'm doing. So yes, I absolutely agree. I can't wait for this to go live. So okay, if we can move on, please, Adama. So just to kind of reinforce our vision as lead authors, Suzanne, Johan and myself, we've all worked in training, we've all worked in consultancy, and we've all worked directly with the business as well. So we were each of us bringing experience from all of those areas, and we really wanted to make sure that we weren't creating something which was academic and which wasn't going to help people. So we've worked so hard, and all through the reviews our focus was on, are we giving people practical skills? Are we giving people real case studies that they can draw on? Are we going to give them something that feels fun and interesting? Is this going to be something that people will enjoy reading? And we kind of stuck to this idea that the principles are more important than the methods. So whatever you're doing within your service management career, it's more about the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and being able to draw on a wide variety of tools and techniques as part of that journey. So it's much more about, you know, what are we trying to do, rather than trying to create a perfect DevOps implementation or getting bogged down in really detailed process documentation. It's, you know, VeriSM is a product that will stand on its own. It's an approach that, you know, people can pick up and start playing with just by reading the books. But these books will also support training courses as well. And we wanted to make sure that the content that was in there would give people an interesting and an exciting training experience too. And what you can see on that picture there is, this is one of the whiteboards that we drew up in our face-to-face meeting. So we're very much focused on what should people be able to do after they've had some VeriSM training or after they've had the VeriSM book. It's very much about, well, you should have some practical skills. You should feel like you can go back to work and start actually applying some of this and actually trying some of these things. And if we can move on, please, again, Adama. So just a small selection of our contributors here, and some of them you might be familiar with from social media. Some of them I would hope will be new faces to you as well, because we did try and get contributors who are maybe not the people that you see on Twitter every week or presenting at all of the conferences. We wanted to make sure we had the kind of the practitioners who were just there doing the job every day. So we did have such a broad range of voices and opinions, and you know, we didn't always get on absolutely perfectly because we were collaborating as a huge group. Sometimes we had differences of opinion or different experiences, and it was about working through that and finding the common themes that would go into the VeriSM book and that would actually be helpful for people. We all tend to look at things through the lens of our own experiences, but there are some principles that are true for service management all over the world. So it was trying to distill the things that are different for everybody, but make sure we caught the common principles as well. And if we can move on to the company slide as well, please. So again, this isn't a full list of the organisations that were involved, but this is just a highlight of some of the organisations that were part of this project. And again, you will probably see some names there that you are familiar with. Citic Tech, Kaboo.com and 6.6. They're the three VeriSM early adopters who've got their stories in the next VeriSM publication. But we've got all sorts of different organisations there, you know, from ServiceNow, who are an absolutely enormous service management tool vendor, through to Hippo Digital, who are a very niche agile design organisation who are working on lots of projects with charities and UK government. So again, you know, a huge mix of organisations, again from all over the world, and that was absolutely essential for us in creating this content. And if we can move on, please, Anima. So the next VeriSM book is going to be published very soon. The ebook's going to come first, and I've got the exact date, which is coming up on a later slide. But what I wanted to do in this session is just give you a sneak preview of some of the content that's in there. So just give you a bit of a heads up on some of the topics that we cover, and hopefully just pique your interest a little bit for when this book is launched. So we've split the book into two halves. There's part A and part B. Part A is the content that is going to be suitable for all organisations, and then part B is the case studies, the interviews, the vendor perspectives. So a little bit more subjective, but again, people's experiences of digital transformation, people's stories. So really, really fascinating content in there as well. But within part A of the book, we've got digital transformation in context. So looking at the impact on people and organisations. So thinking about, if you're a fairly traditional organisation, what are the options for you to start transforming? What's it going to mean for you in terms of your structure? What approaches and options? So will you try and lead your transformation initiative yourself? Are you going to work with an external organisation? All these kind of questions are covered in that section. So there's some specific content on the different approaches and the different options that are available to you, and that's going to help you kind of start to shape your thoughts about what digital transformation will mean for your organisation. We've also touched on leadership, and this was a debate that we had in the author team because it started to feel like we were just putting the word digital in front of everything, but we did discuss leadership and how this might be different in the digital age at some length, and there is some content that we felt was very valid to include about how digital transformation actually has an effect on things like organisational structure. What does it mean for leaders? How does the leadership and the management element split out? So there's some really, really good content in there, and just kind of emphasising the fact that this is not necessarily just something that we expect from the CIO or the CTO. We link it through to some case studies about the rise of the chief digital officer and the fact that some organisations are actually creating roles and job titles that have a digital element, and their remit is across the entire organisation. So their remit is looking at, you know, everybody, not just IT, but thinking about how technology can enable and support business processes, products and services. We've got some content about adapting to constant change. So this comes from Karen Ferris, who's very much a leader in this field. Her thinking on organisational change management and how we react to change has evolved over her career. So she's got some guidance about what organisations can do to adapt to this world where things are changing pretty constantly, and how we just need to change our mindset and our focus. So there's some really good practical examples there, and again in part B of the book we've got an in-depth interview with Karen too, where she shares some tips. The collaboration chapter, so this was mainly authored by a company called Hornbill, so a software company who have actually got rid of email within their organisation, and all of their staff are now collaborating using a collaboration platform and using kind of conversation rather than these individual email conversations where everything gets lost. So Jerry Sweeney, who's the chief exec at Hornbill, shares his experiences in there, and for me personally this has actually been a kind of a chapter that created a change in my behaviour, because I've taken some of the lessons from there and actually implemented them in my own organisation. So that was a good one for me. Knowledge management, we worked with some global leaders including Simone Moore and April Allen, and again that's just looking at, yes, knowledge management's always been important, but what's changed in this digital age? You know, how do the tools and the technology that's available to us, how does that affect how we store knowledge? How do things like artificial intelligence and big data affect knowledge management? And we also focus in on outcomes. Again, outcomes is not a new topic, but we discussed the fact that for digital products and services, it can actually be much more challenging to define your outcomes because you may not have much direct interaction with the consumers of your products and services. So we've got some useful techniques and tips in there too. The transformation techniques, there is a huge amount of practical content in here. And just to kind of pick out a couple of examples, we've got this concept of business innovation circles, which is something that Johan uses in his organisation and is a really good way to kind of shape and test new ideas. We've got concepts like lean startup in there. So a selection of things that you can use. You know, we're not saying pick up every single thing in the book and use it, but some things in there that you can use to actually shape your thinking and drive things forward. And if we can move on, please, Adama. So also in part A, we go into much more detail about how to actually use the VeriSM model, how to use the management mesh, how to build it, how it will evolve over time. So because this is a fairly new concept and we were getting a lot of questions from people about how do we make this more practical, we've got an amazing case study in there, a really detailed case study that Suzanne van Hove authored, which is based around a healthcare organisation, and that case study is then developed all the way through this part of the book. So the unwrapped and applied elements are looking at how is this case study evolving. So we've got the content in there, which is, you know, fairly generic about how a management mesh will evolve, but you've also got some really detailed examples in there that you can see being applied to an example organisation. So what we've done there is really try and answer the questions that we've been asked and try and help you as you're using the book, as you're starting to work with VeriSM, to give you some practical guidance that will make that simpler for you. So there is going to be a webinar on the 4th of September, which you can see there. You can register for that via the VeriSM website. But that webinar, Suzanne's going to take the lead for that one and is going to walk through in much more detail about how to build the mesh and put you some really good examples in there. So if you've got time for that and you want to know about that in much more detail, then I would really recommend you sign up for that one. And if we can move on, please, Adama. So as I mentioned earlier, part B of the book is the case studies, it's interviews, it's stories, it's inspiration. And, you know, the kind of the point to emphasize here is that everybody's digital transformation journey will be different, but that doesn't mean that you can learn a lesson from somebody else. So what we've tried to do here is give some examples of things that successful organizations are doing, or, you know, share some vendor perspectives about how the market's evolving. And the idea is to just to give you some, I guess, ideas that can prompt you to make changes in your own organization. So for example, we spoke with Sky Betting and Gaming, who are very much a digital first organization, and they were talking to us about the fact that for them Friday afternoon is learning and development time. So on a Friday afternoon, everybody who's not kind of front-facing operations gets to log off and they get to research something that they're interested in, or they get to collaborate and work together on projects, many of which have gone on to become business services. And that's a really simple idea, but it's the kind of thing that often gets lost in day-to-day operations. So it's the kind of thing that, you know, we hope will be of inspiration to people. So you can see here we've got our VeriSM early adopters, so 6.6, so we're going to hear from Steve very soon. Citic Tech, Kabu.com, we're going to hear from Mr. Toda. We've got industry experts like Karen Ferris, like Jack Bishop from the TBM organisation. We've got vendor perspectives, and we've also included some content here about automating VeriSM and the kind of tool sets that you might use. So this is another question that people have been asking us about, you know, is there a tool for VeriSM? Is there something that I can implement in my organization? And, you know, as a service management professional, it makes you a little bit nervous because you think, let's not jump straight to the tool and ignore the culture part, which is the bit that's really important. But it is a very valid question, and I think it does help, particularly in larger organisations, if there is some way that you can kind of collaborate or view some data via a tool set. So, you know, whilst we're absolutely not recommending a particular tool or saying we think this one is the best, we have worked with some software organizations just to create some examples so that if you were thinking about that, it does give you some ideas. So if we can move on, please, Adama. So one of the organizations that we spoke with about automating VeriSM and, you know, tool sets for VeriSM is an organization called Solitis, who have a tool set which is called Convergence, and this actually very much works with VeriSM because it is about looking at business outcomes and then pulling together all of the capabilities, the technology, the resources that you need in order to deliver that. So that very much aligns with the management mesh concept that we have within VeriSM. So we did work with Solitis just to create some examples, and in part B of the book, what you will find is a walkthrough of that convergence product and some screenshots in there as well of what that might look like, and things like the dashboards that you can create, so you can see some examples there. And then if we can move on again, please, Adama. And then ServiceNow have been very involved with the VeriSM project. They're involved as authors on both book 1 and book 2. And when we were speaking to ServiceNow about their next release, we also felt there was quite a strong tie-in with VeriSM there, because the next ServiceNow update is about building in this kind of culture of continual improvement. And what that's doing is it's highlighting weaknesses in an organization's service capabilities. So some of that is using artificial intelligence, but it's actually making suggestions about where there might be something missing or where something could be done better. And again, this links very strongly to the management mesh, because it is going to highlight where perhaps a new management practice might be necessary, or a process could be improved, some different technology might help. So we're kind of continuing that conversation with ServiceNow, and Steve, who's going to talk next, they're actually using ServiceNow at Cloud Gateway as well. So we're not kind of promoting a tool set here and saying that, you know, one's better than another, but if you are looking as an organization about how might we automate VeriSM, you know, how do we bring it into the organization and support it with a tool, there are some options available, and you know, I can make introductions to the people from these organizations if you want to explore that a little bit further. And if we can move on, please, Adama. So we've got our first opportunity for some questions here before we go into our early adopter story. So Adama and Suzanne, I'll let you take over from there.
Okay, Claire, we already have 2 questions that I need to address to you, okay? The first question, yes, service culture.
Service culture.
Culture is a very powerful aspect of VeriSM. How to implement and how to transfer culture is a very big ask for a service manager. Can you please let us know if we have any framework in VeriSM for this?
That is a really good question, and it's also an enormous question, and it's one that we spent a long time working on as an author group, particularly with the independent consultants in the group, who were almost asking, you know, how are we selling this to our clients and getting that sponsorship within the organization? So there is there's elements within the book which will be extremely helpful to you in terms of transforming culture. So things like the chapter on constant change, which looks at how structure might need to change. It looks at how employees are given more autonomy and encouraged to feel more sense of ownership within the organisation. The way that VeriSM talks about the entire organisation working together and killing this kind of chasm between IT and the business. So there's lots of kind of individual bits which will be very, very helpful within the book. But I think I want to pick up on the point you made as well, which is about the fact that it's challenging for a service manager to do this. And absolutely, that is correct, because for a culture change like the one that we're talking about here, we certainly need that kind of that C-level sponsorship. And we have a chapter which is the very last chapter of part A, if I remember correctly, which is basically talking about selling VeriSM. How do we sell VeriSM within the organisation? So how do we work with people at the C-level? What are the benefits that we expect to see? And that's what I would expect to be very helpful for a service manager, because it's another question that we've had is who does VeriSM within an organisation? And we saw this actually when we were discussing it within the author team. We saw this as a huge opportunity for service management professionals to actually step up. And you know, this could be an evolution for organisations, but for me, I think it could be the evolution of service management as a profession as well, because we need to engage at a different level. We need to get out of the IT department and we need to be working across the organisation. So that was quite a long answer, but it's a big question. And to summarise, there's lots of content in the book that's going to help. Some of it is about the things that need to happen. Some of it is about how we actually sell the need for this to happen. But I absolutely see service managers as being some of the people who are driving this within organisations.
Okay, Claire. So we have three questions for now. One's going to be probably a bit long answer, and the other ones, they are more short. So then afterwards we can proceed for the rest of the presentation.
Okay.
Another question we always have a risk where service. No, let me start again. We always have a risk where service management can kill collaboration culture, e.g., SLA, legacy infrastructure. How VeriSM can help here?
So I think that's actually very true. And one of the criticisms of service management in a lot of organizations is it's become very siloed. Each process area becomes a silo. IT itself is a silo. And if you're working in one of those organizations where, you know, you've maybe got a traditional ITIL service management department, but then you've got a team that's doing agile and another team that's doing DevOps, that can become a silo as well. And what we've tried to do to combat that within VeriSM is to focus very much on the organisation as a whole. All of the organisation needs to work together. And one of the things that we did very, very deliberately was try and keep the language simple and remove a lot of the jargon. So it's very easy to get bogged down in key performance indicators and service level agreements and critical success factors, when actually we're just talking about measuring the things that are important. And you know, for me, that's an enormous part of it, is just keeping the language simple so that everybody who wants to collaborate can join the conversation without feeling like they're at a disadvantage or that there are things in there that they don't understand. So that's the key for me from a VeriSM perspective, is keeping the language simple and making sure that we're looking at everything from the perspective of the whole organisation, so it doesn't become us and them, you know, whoever us and them in that situation might be.
Thank you, Claire. The next question is, the VeriSM will change the ITIL process?
So what VeriSM's doing is looking at service management from the perspective of the entire organisation. And if we think about an example of a service like online banking, it's historically been thought of as an IT service, but in fact, in order for online banking to be effective, you know, we need technical skills in there, we need sales, customer service, marketing, branding. So we're looking from the perspective of the entire organisation. All of the areas of the organisation that are involved in a product or service will have their own ways of working. And for an IT department or IT operations, that might well include ITIL. It's probably going to include DevOps and some bits of Agile and Lean now in a lot of organisations. But the main point is that VeriSM is not replacing things like ITIL or changing things like ITIL. VeriSM's looking at a much broader perspective than that and saying, okay, you know, well, what we've got is we've got ITIL, but we've got DevOps and we've got Agile and we've got Lean. How are we making sure that they're all working together and we're getting the outcomes that we want? So using the management mesh, we're looking at how these things all kind of knit together. So ITIL itself will be an important part of the management mesh for most organisations, but the key is making sure that it's working as it needs to and it's integrated with all the areas it needs to be integrated with. Okay, so I'm going to introduce now Steve Leach from 6.6. So Steve's been an early adopter of VeriSM, and Steve is going to share some information about his VeriSM journey with us. So take it away, Steve.
I am indeed, Claire. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay still?
Yeah, hear you perfectly.
Yeah, BT haven't sabotaged me yet then. Oh, sorry, did I say that out loud? Right. If you could move on to the first of my slides, please, Adamar, that would be very appreciated. Thank you very much. Now, many of you will have heard 6.6 and Cloud Gateway mentioned once or twice into that introduction. I'm going to talk you through who 6.6 are, what Cloud Gateway is, and why my journey as an early adopter, I think I have to use the word journey because it has been so relevant, I think, to what VeriSM is trying to do and to what I've been trying to do. So if you could show the next slide, please. So very briefly, I'm going to tell you a bit about 6.6 and Cloud Gateway, a little bit about myself to put that in context, and then I'm going to give an update on the ITSM crowd that I was pleased to be part of one of Claire's presentations back in April, and tell you what we've done since then to make VeriSM real for us. And I suppose basically to go back to what Suzanne said earlier on, to how we've actually applied it. So next slide, please. So what is 6.6? 6.6 is a consultancy organisation based in central London with three major streams of consultancy being big data, cybersecurity and digital transformation. That means if you think about it, if you think about those three streams, they don't really need a service management capability because that's not the business they're in. But when they decided to launch a product called Cloud Gateway, which enables any organisation to connect securely to their own cloud provider and minimize the hardware and infrastructure costs on their site, all of a sudden it's a service that needs development and support. So I was brought in to actually build the service management from the ground up in terms of what Cloud Gateway needed to be and the support model we felt we needed for this digital age. So next slide, please, Adamar. The reason I was brought in is that I knew the managing director and some of the colleagues from many, many years ago in my Vodafone days. I've been actually an ITIL trainer, evangelist, guru, whatever word you want to put. I've been it for about the last nearly a quarter of a century. And then I came along to an organization and I realized, well, look, cloud computing has come along in terms of ITIL fairly recently. So it's no good me joining an organization and trying to shoehorn in just an ITIL model. We'll put ITIL where it belongs, in the right place at the support end, and we needed something new. And VeriSM came along, and I was pointed towards VeriSM by one of my Vodafone colleagues. And I talked to the way our developers use DevOps, NetOps, Agile approaches, and it was suddenly clear to me that VeriSM was the exact thing I needed. And it was, in terms of Cloud Gateway being a startup, This was an easy decision. This was an absolute no-brainer, because once I'd convinced the CEO, the CTO, and the CFO that we needed this, there wasn't a whole huge organization to turn around. So I've got a small group of very senior stakeholders on side straight away. And being a startup, the only way we can sensibly work together is by literally working together and removing silos. So I quickly realized there was actually, the silo mentality wasn't really there, and the willingness to do something new that made sense was also there as well. So it was easy to get started within Cloud Gateway, and I just then had to learn VeriSM. So as our managing director so succinctly put it on LinkedIn yesterday, I am indeed the old dog, and this is my new trick. So next slide, please, Adamar. Back in April, I made the presentation and I showed how I'd started, what my initial approach was. So what did we do? Well, we had to work out how many staff we needed, what roles they needed, and what training they needed. So we then wanted to buy a tool that would enable us to support our customers. So I insisted that all of our support staff were trained to ITIL Foundation level. All of the guys working in my team got their VeriSM Foundation qualification. So we've all been through this new exam, and we purchased ServiceNow as our chosen service management tool and trained one of our guys to be a system administrator. What else have we done? We have signed service level agreements, the ITIL support processes, obviously in advance of the ITIL refresh, so we'll see what that delivers. The ITIL support processes we know and love, we flowcharted, documented, tested, and agreed them to be appropriate for our business and our customers. And we have some draft service management principles, which I'll show you again later, to actually give us the guardrails we need for our VeriSM model. We have an outline management mesh, which is quite new, which I can show you later. And I quickly got our DevOps manager on side. You know, my favorite expression about ITIL being the enemy of DevOps, that still makes me laugh, and we still joke about that. But the point is, ITIL is no longer the enemy of DevOps. Through VeriSM, you bring these two techniques together. Next slide, please, Adamar. So where are we now? Now, I'm going to use some of the wording that was used by previous presenters on here. Claire talked about C-level sponsorship. I got that pretty much straight away from our C-levels. The question that Adamar just answered was about culture. It was quickly clear that the sort of company we wanted to be, the culture of service management, was absolutely important to us. We want to be a provider that customers enjoy working with. So we need the best and slickest service management organization we can have. And then how do I make this work? Was, I think, one of Claire's first slides. So how are we trying to make this work? Well, I've worked for a number of corporates in the past. You probably see through LinkedIn who they are. Now, in some cases, we had 8 different governance gates to get from the first discussion with the customer to a new service for them going live. Now, 8 to me is far too many. But I thought to myself, well, 1 is probably too few. So once we built our model, my team and I, we stood back and we said, what are the key interfaces between ourselves, our developers, our product manager, HR, sales, marketing, and so on. So we built 3 simple governance gates into our support model that I'll be showing you in a moment. I then met Sigrid and Suzanne Galetli, who's just been on this call, in the IFDC. And because of the way we were able to take this to quite an advanced level compared to some other people, it seems to have caused a great deal of excitement. I think that's great, because even at my age, I can still get excited about new ideas. So I'm working with Suzanne Galetli to help our model be used for what they're calling the VeriSM Starter Toolkit. Initial discussions look promising, a lot more work to do, but if some people can benefit from the work I've done, the mistakes I've made, and how we've implemented VeriSM and the lessons we've learned, then absolutely great. We've created the service management section on our Cloud Gateway website, where we're showing pictorially and in a bit of narrative what VeriSM is, why we're doing it, and why it is our differentiator. We've now recruited extra staff, so as well as enhancing our presence in London, we now have a Leeds office, where our service desk, delivery manager, and our development staff all work together as one, completely independent of silos. And talking of silos, again, my bottom point here, we have now, within Cloud Gateway, we've got dedicated sales, marketing, HR, development, and service teams. who are all there on behalf of 6.6 to get the Cloud Gateway product developed, enhanced, improved, delivered to customers, supported, and to enable the customers to achieve their outcomes. You can't do this in a small company by working in silos. So we frequently and necessarily talk together, we share things together, and I got representatives from each one of these organizations to help me populate my VeriSM model, which is rapidly maturing, as I hope you'll see in a moment. Next slide, please, Adamar. So here we are then, from the support model, which I'll show you an extract of in a moment, 3 very simple governance gates. Now, I believe, and we've discussed this with the DevOps and with our C-level colleagues, very early on in the transition of a new product, new functionality, or a new customer, you need to step back and say, hang on, are our service management principles still being followed, or are we going adrift from them? If we are drifting away and there's a non-compliance, we won't put our hand up and say no. We'll say to the developers, why is it you're unable to comply at this point? Perhaps the service management principles need updating. So what it is, very early on, point 9 in my service management model is where myself and my leads colleague, my service delivery manager, we sit with our developers, our DevOps and NetOps people, and the input, obviously VeriSM calls it a service blueprint, so I've called it that on the diagram. They might call it a design document, an HLDD, I don't mind. It's just us saying, look, let's have a look at the document and let's simply check that this conforms with the principles we all agreed on and we established. Now, we can't decide whether to call that governance gate 1 or guardrail 1 to be completely VeriSM, but we'll see how that goes. So that's an early gate, as you can see by the traffic light symbol on the left. Once we've gone through that gate, a lot more work takes place, more marketing takes place. My service manager will join the people to go and bless you, whoever that was. Our marketing people and service manager will start to collect some use case information from the customer, so we know what they're going to be using Cloud Gateway for and why, so we can understand the impact to them of a failure, and we can link that to our SLAs, to our incident management severities, and to our user acceptance tests. So the collecting the customer information, the consumer input, if you like, very early, and using that as the theme through our support model is very important. But then we have to get to a point where, before our DevOps and NetOps people start on a 2-week agile development cycle, I want to say, well, hang on, let's make sure these guys aren't wasting a bit of time and effort. Let's have a ServiceNow change record as the audit trail of that point we've reached, and we'll call that governance guardrail 2. And so the input will be a change request. The gate is there to say, have we considered all the things you would in a normal ITIL change record? Cost, resources, risk, business impact, and so on. And the output of this will be that we start to populate our RAID log. Now, if there are any risks identified at that point, and with a potential new product or potential new customer they were, that's when we start to populate the RAID log, which we then use for the rest of our journey as well. We'll use a change template and the change request as an input, and the output will be approval to carry on with each 2-week cycle of build, test, and implement. So as we move on through the model, we've now moved from define to provide into produce. Then I think it's absolutely essential, and this is something I've brought with me from both Vodafone and Serco. It's something, whether you call it a HOTS, handover to service, whether you call it AILS, acceptance into live service, or whether you call it service onboarding, I don't mind. But sometime just before we go live for a new customer, I want our ServiceNow administrator, who will have been setting this up so that the actual original use cases can be achieved by the technology we've been developing and delivering. Let's have a checklist. We've got this checklist in one of our internal documents, and we're regularly using it. So as you can see, it's a grey document there called onboarding checklist. We feed this into process step 38, and we say, have we got the service desk set up? Is everybody trained? Have we got an escalation table? Is the customer ready? Does everybody know what's happening? Has this been publicized? Are we ready to support it? Have we got the out of out? In other words, is everything in step? Is everything ready to go? If not, we either add something else to the RAID log as a risk, and we manage and mitigate that risk, or we go back to the developers and our support guys and we'll say, well, hang on, there's just a little bit of work needed here. So what I can hope you can see there To go back to Claire's wording earlier on, how do I make this work? This is my first attempt to make this work for 6.6 Cloud Gateway. A very early service management principles gate, followed by a change gate somewhere towards the middle of the development cycle, followed finally by the handover to service gate. And in an ideal world, the product and the technology sails through all three of these gates. So next slide, please, Adamar. Now, I know that I've broken some of the rules of flowcharting and I've broken some of the rules of presentations, but obviously with there being 4 or 5 different swim lanes and 4 stages of VeriSM, I couldn't possibly get the whole model on the slide. So I just want to show you an extract. This is the current 6.6 Cloud Gateway service management model. You can perhaps see a big triangle. I don't know if my arrow is showing up there, but in the service team, you've got 2 decision boxes. Those are 2 of the 3 gates I just mentioned. But the main point I want to show you about this is look at the swim lanes. The first one is the consumer, but the second one is sales and marketing, commercial, legal. That is us working together with all of our colleagues, irrespective of which department they work for. And I got our dedicated sales manager to actually volunteer those green boxes. He says, well, this is our sales process. Then I got in the next column, our development team manager to volunteer those yellow boxes. And obviously me and my service team wrote the blue boxes. So I know the stakeholders who are responsible for those elements have written and are happy with those. All I had to do was document it and build the interfaces between them to make my VeriSM model start to work. As you can see from the text on the left, it's still being finalized, but wherever there's a gray document symbol on that diagram there, all those documents have been described, defined, and have an owner. All of the blue diamond shapes, the governance gates, as you heard on the previous slide, they are all managed and owned. We have vertical swim lanes where every single potential stakeholder is involved somewhere. Each of these numbered process boxes are broken down to a lower level, which describes the actual inputs, activities, and outputs of that box. And the important theme, as I said earlier on, the customer use cases collected at produce are used to create the user acceptance tests at provide, are used for the onboarding checklist. So by the time something goes live, a new product or a new customer, we should have made sure that the original use cases, i.e. the very reason these people are buying Cloud Gateway from us, can be satisfied by the product we've delivered. So that's the service management model we have in place at the moment, and we are maturing. I've shared a horizontal version of that with Suzanne Galetli to be this template for the new starter kit we were talking about. But for me to be able to draw it correctly and get defined and produced on, I had to create this vertical version, which I'm kind of proud of, if I'm brutally honest. So next slide, please, Adamar. I've nearly finished, those who've heard my voice for a long, long time. Now, my colleague Steve Wilkins in Leeds and I, he's done most of this. We've been thinking about our management mesh. What should it look like? So obviously, resources, emerging technologies, management practices, environment. Any one of you who have seen the excellent VeriSM First book will realize that those are the 4 elements of the management mesh. What we've tried to draw on there are the specifics that we use. So for instance, on the emerging technologies, cloud horizontal, Amazon Azure, firewall as a service, infrastructure as a service. Sorry, that's my reminder to actually stop talking very soon. We've got partners. Again, the good old ITIL, the 4 Ps. We still think about partners, products, processes, and products. On the left, we've got a list of some of our potential competitors. We've got our assets. Again, we're still working on this, but as you can see at the bottom, the important point of this is we use ITIL to actually support the product once it's gone live. We use Agile, DevOps, CI, and CD management practices as described in the first book. They are live, they are real, they are in operation, and they are all working together to give us this management mesh, which will become the center of our operating model once matured. Next slide, please, Adamar. So what are the next steps? What is the way ahead for us? We will mature this mesh into a tool that can be used as a reference document. Now, the E of VeriSM stands for evolve. So the service management model I showed you 2 slides ago can never stay static for too long. It must evolve. technology, organizations, techniques will all be evolving. And as our product suite continues to evolve, so I will evolve the service management model to remain fit for purpose. I'm hoping the mature version of that I can share with IFDC will contribute to the VeriSM starter kit, because I'm very keen and passionate about not only working for 6.6 Cloud Gateway, but helping VeriSM be the service management technique for the rest of, for the rest of certainly the next few decades, and I believe it possibly will be. So I'd like to help contribute to that. And finally, what is my vision statement? There it is. You've got to have a high target to aim at. We in 6.6 Cloud Gateway are aiming to become a world leader in providing VeriSM-based service management to our customers. I believe we made a good start. The fact that I'm on here presenting to you and that I'm involved in the IFDC means some other key organizations are perhaps agreeing with us, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So next slide, please, Adamar. You'll all be pleased to hear that's me. I've spoken about Cloud Gateway. I've introduced myself. I've shown you what we've done since the ITSM crowd. I've talked about the maturity of our model, the 3 governance gates, the management mesh, and where I believe we're going. So I've now finished. Are there any questions for me, Adamar?
Yes, Steve. The first question, what are the key challenges that you have faced within the guardrails? Sorry.
The key challenge in creating the service management principles as guardrails. Yes. Well, the first challenge was explaining to the people who weren't going through the VeriSM training, i.e. getting their buy-in, explaining to them what the expression guardrails meant and why we needed them. And the second challenge was going and talking to our DevOps, our developers, our marketing people, and getting them to all agree what a common set of principles were. But again, I shamelessly took advantage of the fact that our organization, being a startup, is a lot smaller and more agile than many of the big corporates. So the challenges I faced, Adamar, actually were quite, in my belief, were quite manageable because of being a startup, because where we were in terms of maturity. So I hope that's some sort of answer.
Yes, thank you very much. And the second question, do you think that the guardrails caused any suffering to the agile way that you have been used at your organization?
Yeah, good question. Well, I used to hate the word governance when I first came across it, because I used to think this is just people putting barriers in the way and stopping people do things. And I know that's a claim often laid at the door of ITIL change management. But by explaining to people, look, I'm putting these guardrails in because I'm going to minimize governance. I'm going to get us working together, and it's going to make all of our jobs easier. I was able, Adamar, to explain that the guardrails were a necessary evil, were implied, and the service management principles being the guardrails, and having that first step where we stop and say, okay, are we still on track, or have we veered off one of our guardrails, if you like? I was able to convince people that by minimizing governance, the guardrails were an absolute necessity and were actually going to keep our focus and keep us aligned to the use cases we collected earlier on. So that's how I was able to do it. Obviously, it does slow down things a bit, but you've got to have a minimum level of governance. I absolutely accept that, and the guardrails are part of that, and everybody understood that.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you very much, whoever asked those questions. I will hand back to Claire.
Okay, Claire.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. That was absolutely brilliant. It's been amazing for me to see VeriSM actually starting to be used in organizations, and to hear about your journey and see the work that you're doing just brings it to life even more. So thank you so much for that. Steve and I will be presenting together at the ITSMF UK conference later this year, so if you're attending that, by all means come along and say hello to us there. So the next session that we've got for you is from Mr. Toda in Japan, and he's been working on a project with Kabu.com, which they were using VeriSM as the approach for that. So Adama, if you could start us off with this content, please.
Hello everybody, thank you for watching. I'm Luke Toda. Today I'd like to report VeriSM adoption as a case study from Tokyo, Japan. This is the first case of our data transformation project, and we focused on the business speed faster, which means move quickly with Azure G. So, the objective of this project is making sure high-speed development with TPS-style Agile, which is Scrum, and release IT services quickly using DevOps 2.1, which I'm advocating since 2010 on my experience. But I had a big issue. It is how increase business speed in business unit and synchronizing with the high-speed Agile development. So I'm applying TMS Kaizenjuku into business unit instead of Scrum to increasing their business speed, and how to collaborate between both business unit and IT. VeriSM is providing us good thought to combine both business and IT and manage simultaneously. Especially, management mesh is useful to manage simultaneous decision-making between business and IT. This is the reason why Cub.com Securities implement VeriSM concept and model in this project. We are visiting to Cub.com Securities located Otemachi, where is the heart of the financial district in Tokyo. There are many financial firms around here. This company is a one-off group company in huge Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, a company founded in November 1999, started as an online stock trading company. Today, they are providing various financial services such as stock trading, FX trading, investment trust, and domestic bond. In this year, they decided to enter a new business area with new service for opening up new customers layers, which is going to join into cryptocurrency market, such as Bitcoin trading. This is a project to develop and deploy new service of cryptocurrency trading. As you may know, this is really data transformation project. So they are applying VeriSM concept and model and strictly focus on the faster business speed than ever they did. Key methodology of this project are utilizing TPS-style Agile, DevOps 2.1, and management mesh in VeriSM for increasing business speed. Today, I'd like to introduce you their VeriSM project, how carried and how to increase their business speed. We tried totally new way of this project, which is a new practice of IT planning, new way of requirement definition, new way of IT service design method, and new management scheme for synchronizing collaboration between business and IT. Let me show you one big change. It is the new practice of IT planning. How to decide your project budget? Used to be, we calculate all of estimated cost, then define total budget of the project and propose it to executives and decide it. We changed this practice. The budget of the project is only business value. How much cost to be able to spend for? It is as like as investor's point of view. We are using the business model canvas for getting approval with A3 thinking like Toyota. For instance, you have a fancy idea of new IT service in your business. You sum up your idea into business model canvas by A3 thinking. Then, you can present your idea to weekly review board. After your 15 minutes presentation, reviewer bidding the value of your idea. Like this. Okay, I will give you $100,000 to realize it within 24 weeks. You got $100,000 budget now. So, you have to develop your project plan within 4 weeks and do it. This is the outline of the system. It's simple cryptocurrency trading system, but key function of this service is wallet management. As you may know, existing cryptocurrency trader has weak security for wallet, so sometimes hackers steal the data in the wallet. Cub.com focused on this issue. They will provide their customer more secured wallet management. The characteristic of this system is combining open system in front end and secured legacy database system in back end. There are many restrictions of using secured legacy system, so we have to solve operational issues of collaboration between both systems with just-in-time. This is the process flow of our VeriSM adoption. We have a little bit arranged from VeriSM model. Define process is aiming for create product plan, such as define variable business process, define UX design, design for functions of IT services, design operation flow, SLA, and infrastructures, such as runtime, deployment pipeline, test environment, development environment. Major activity in this process is to hold 2 days planning session and define the items. What should we do? Produce and provide process are really as same as DevOps 2.1 process. We are adding one more process before produce process, which is inception process. This added process is aiming for preparing faster and quicker development and deployment works. We set up OBEAR for this project and complete visual management board. In produce process, we implement TPS style agile for faster development, which is based upon Scrum and XP practice. And additionally, the size of task should be smaller and equality. We are conducting our team to break down into 1 hour tasks from product backlog. Mainstream of provide process is really deployment pipeline. We should operate it single piece flow as TPS. In the respond stage, how can we get feedback from customer and how to react for request for changes? We utilize social network tools such as Twitter, LINE, and Facebook for communicating with customer instead of existing call center operation by phone and email. Adding reflection process is aiming for building larger PDCA cycle in VeriSM model to manage management mesh and business. We have a plan to hold reflection meeting by quarterly to review EOL conditions what we develop software of this project. At beginning of April, this project started after executive's approval. This is major activity in each month what we did. A key activity of this project is held 2 days planning session in defined process, which has an influence upon success to faster operation of this project. We spend about 3 weeks to prepare for 2 days planning session. We collect many data for clearly defined business model and required IT service. We use the business model canvas and value stream mapping and user story in this process. Attendees of this planning session are development team, product owner, representative of the business planning, operation team, infrastructure engineer, security specialist, and governance team. And the outcome of this session are product backlog described by user story, defined body process using value stream map, draft of SLA, management mesh, and EOL condition of the services. This session was used CPS practice. CPS is aiming for creating complete action plan with full consensus in the team. It applied a technique of group dynamics, which is communication, conflict, creativity, consensus, and commitment. And it gave us an efficient discussion with full controlled discussion practice by session leader. We designed discussion with time box as Scrum. 1 hour time box create concentration. We discuss one subject at a time, a decision made with unanimous agreement. 2 days planning session began 10-minute message from CEO by movie. He addressed his passion and vision for the new business and what value bring us by our challenges. After CEO's message, product owner and business representative explained basic information of the new business and major IT service, what they'd already discussed with business executives, including CEO and COO. Then started discussion one by one subject from system architecture issues. Next, discuss about ITSM related issues. Then, discuss about management mesh. Produce and provide process, it really develops itself. Especially, produce process is the most important for building up VeriSM process, because the produce process creates a rhythm for entire VeriSM process as like as a heartbeat. So, it's important how to build up your development team's working behavior. This is a key for success of high-speed operation. The following provide process. It means automated deployment pipeline process. So, the rhythm of produce process directly affects services delivery speed. We are strongly focused on the produce process, how to ask the team for both speed and quality. I show you great performance of our development team as a reference how they worked. Our development team worked 2 weeks a sprint with 4 engineers a team, and they create a body process of the services in 2 sprints, and some of the developed Java source code are about 11,000 lines of code in 4 weeks. Amazing speed. They used pair programming, test-driven development, and refactoring in XP practices, and also continuous integration in every day. Therefore, I would say to implement TPS-style Agile in this produce process. TPS-style Agile is strongly focused on development speed and high quality of the output with full-stack engineers and operates a team based upon TPS thought, which means import the ideas from TPS, such as takt time create rhythm, heijunka means leveling workload, kaizen and avoiding muda, JKK, jikote kanketsu in Japanese, means self-contained process, reduce real-time, single-piece flow with pull system, and build up streamlined process flow. Agile as the same thought. After 2 sprints passed, they did demonstration for acceptance test by product owner and business representative. Of course, passed everything what they developed. Finally, on July 6, they demonstrated new services to executives, and the executives uploaded their amazing development speed and high quality of output. For example, I show you the quality performance. Of course, they had completed programming with bug-free as an ordinary quality level. We checked their attractive quality level by our new AI refactoring tool. This tool is reviewing how the program will be easy to do at maintenance. Measurement items are readability of source code, complexity of the sentence structure, and appropriateness of comment consistency. As you can see, all of 3 measurement items clear over 80%. Usually, quality of open source programs are scored around 80%. If you could implement this thought into your Agile team, you can provide the IT services with just-in-time to your customer. I think this is the only one way for existing enterprise against digital disruption. Attending, I show you wrap up my presentation as you can see the last panel. If you'd like to succeed your VeriSM adoption in your organization, change your behavior to Agile way at first, and build up the automated deployment process with DevOps thought. Then, manage the entire process and activities by VeriSM model. Lastly, please watch CEO's message of Kabu.com Securities. Thank you for watching my video, and I would say good luck.
これからのデジタル時代に我が社にとって必要なものは、投資をされるお客様に心地よく かつ安心して投資をしてもらえる IT サービスを充実させていくことです。そのためには組織を挙げた機敏性が強く求められます。それで私は決断をいたしました。今後ますますビジネスのスピードを高めていくために IT 部門では安心安全で素早くサービスを展開できる体制を構築するVeriSMの導入と、ビジネス部門では IT の素早いサービス展開にマッチした機敏性のある素早いビジネス展開のための組織の筋トレとして TMS 改善軸の2本立てでデジタルトランスフォーメーションに即応し、業界でのリーダーシップを取ります。VeriSMファンタスティック。
Okay, so some really powerful content there from both Steve and Mr. Toda, and if you get a copy of the next VeriSM book, you'll find a lot more detail in there about their journey and the steps that they've taken. But it was brilliant to hear from Mr. Toda about how they were using VeriSM to integrate all the different ways of working and to get the most value from things like TPS and Agile and DevOps also. So for the rest of the session, we've got a couple more short videos from some of our authors, and then we probably won't have time, I don't think, for any more questions, but we've got a brief look at the VeriSM roadmap, and then we'll share some detail with you about where you can get in touch if you did have a question today, but we weren't able to get to it. So Adama, if you want to just share the contributors' messages as well, please.
Hello everybody, my name is Renny Fries and I am a partner in Valcon Consulting in Copenhagen, Denmark. My area of expertise, you can say, is IT service management in general and lean IT in particular. I've spent quite a lot of years trying to make lean make sense in an IT context, particularly within service management and operational management. In terms of contribution and involvement in VeriSM, I have a rather broad involvement actually. I have contributed with content on both books, and I've also both developed and reviewed questions for the foundation and the professional exam. Apart from that, I have also done what I like a lot, is to present VeriSM at a couple of conferences. I think VeriSM matters a lot. Digital transformation is on the agenda everywhere, all industries, public, private sector alike. So we need to have something that brings together all the different frameworks and best practices to make sure that we actually come across to the customers with the right types of outcomes, as we call it. So I do think that it matters quite a lot actually. In the book, VeriSM Unwrapped and Applied, you both get a deeper description and understanding of what VeriSM actually holds. And what I think is actually the coolest thing is that you get a lot of real life examples and testimonials to how you can apply it. So, happy readings.
Hi, my name is Aurelio Antunes, from Brazil, working with technology for almost 35 years, from the strategic level to operational level, from the mainframe to mobile. In my opinion, VeriSM is the answer to improve service management for today, focusing on clients with a holistic approach to service management. VeriSM, Unwrapped and Applied, go deeper in the concepts presented in the first book and orchestrate process, methods, technology, best practices like Lean, DevOps, COVID, ITIL to produce operational model that address the needs that we have in the digital age.
My name is Marlon Molina. I'm director of Computer World University and director of the Education Department of Digital Transformation for the Distance University of Madrid. I'm supporting the VeriSM project with real case scenarios, success stories. I truly believe VeriSM is a new framework that will support the move to the digital area from the technical and technology departments. Finding the gap between the business and the technology can be made by understanding the business, understanding the digital era, and of course support by a framework like VeriSM.
Hi, my name is Richard de Kock. I work for Microsoft, and I was privileged enough to be a co-author and reviewer of the VeriSM Unwrapped and Applied publication. And the areas that I contributed the most to were digital transformation, governance, and the survey sections of the publication itself. So why does VeriSM matter? Well, the industry is saturated with noise around emerging technologies and associated best practices and frameworks that organizations should be adopting in order to remain competitive. And it's really difficult for practitioners to stay abreast with all these different changes, and they often just lead to distraction from the important things that we should be focusing on in digital transformation journeys. And what VeriSM does, it helps remove this noise and this clutter by providing a flexible transformational model which provides the correct context to these various best practices and frameworks that are out there today. And through techniques like the management mesh, make sure that practitioners are able to apply the correct emerging technologies and associated frameworks, etc., to the needs of their organization and the specific needs of their digital transformation initiatives to ensure they have the highest likely chance of success in that space. We really enjoyed putting the publication together, and we're looking forward to seeing the impact it has on the industry. And we're wishing you all the best out there. I hope you see the same value in the publication as we've seen ourselves. And all the best of luck.
Okay, so we are going to be out of time for questions, but Adamar, if you could move us on to the next slide, I'll just share a little bit of information about what we've got coming up. So I mentioned that we have the webinar on September 4th, which is going to go into a lot more detail about the management mesh and the VeriSM model, but then you'll see as well on September 18th, we've kind of got an over to you webinar. So if you did have some detailed questions or maybe some questions that we weren't able to get to today, that would be a perfect webinar to attend because we are going to have some time dedicated. Suzanne, Johan and myself will all be on that webinar, and we're just going to have some time dedicated to answering your questions and hopefully helping you out a little bit as well. So the book launch, you can see there as well when the actual date is going to be. So we're all really, really excited about that. And I would just say thank you to everybody who's attended. You know, more than 100 people on a webinar is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure we'll see just as many on the actual catch-up sessions as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this today. Thank you to everybody who's presented as well. Thank you to all of our contributors, and you know, remember that we've developed VeriSM with the global community, and this is an ongoing conversation. So if you've got questions, comments, input, you know, just get in touch. And Adamar, if you can skip forward, we've got some contact details on the next slide, but you'll also find all of the authors on LinkedIn, on Twitter, you know, anywhere you are social online. So by all means, you know, drop us a line, let us know what you think, and thank you very much again.